Regardless of how old you are or what genre of movies you prefer, you're most likely familiar with Tobe Hooper's 1974 low-budget masterpiece, The Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Its classic status is rarely challenged, and it's widely considered by many to be one of the greatest horror films of all time. I've seen the film dozens of times, and I've seen all the sequels and reboots, which, I should say most, are not very good. A thing I've noticed over the years watching the franchise is that there are 3 films that I always return to for repeat viewings. The original from 1974, the sequel from 1986, and the Platinum Dunes remake from 2003. I'll briefly touch on TCM2 from 1986 by saying that tonally, it's very different from nearly all the other TCM films.
Whoa! So this is Radioland, huh? The infinite turtle, the waves through the ether fuzz roll on forever. Roar! Close that. Hi, I know what you're thinking. This is weird, huh? But I can handle it. You know? You're my fave.
It's intentionally a comedy with horror elements, which is a huge departure from the original film and nearly all the other sequels. For this reason, I won't discuss TCM2 in this video. I'll choose to focus on the original from 1974 and its remake from 2003. It's highly likely I'll cover TCM2 in a future video, so if you want to see that video, comment below.
Dog wheel hunt! Get that bitch, Leatherface! Get that bitch! Dog wheel hunt!
Tobe Hooper's Texas Chainsaw Massacre was made on a minuscule budget of roughly $300,000 and went on to gross over $30 million worldwide. Until the release of John Carpenter's Halloween in 1978, Texas Chainsaw Massacre was considered the most successful independent film of all time. Despite being made nearly 50 years ago, the original 1974 film still stands the test of time as one of the most traumatizing exercises in shock cinema history, and is without a doubt still the best film of the franchise.
The film which you are about to see is an account of the tragedy which befell a group of 5 youths, in particular, Sally Hardesty and her invalid brother, Franklin. It is all the more tragic in that they were young. But had they lived very, very long lives, they could not have expected, nor would they have wished to see as much of the mad and macabre as they were to see that day. For them, an idyllic summer afternoon drive became a nightmare. The events of that day were to lead to the discovery of one of the most bizarre crimes in the annals of American history, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
The intention here with the opening narration and text was to mislead people into believing the events that transpire in the film were based on true events. Hooper reportedly was inspired to mislead the audience because of being lied to by the government about Watergate and Vietnam. The movie was very much influenced by that time period and Hooper's awareness of how America reacted to media. Audiences were a little more naive in 1974, and Hooper understood this. His ability to understand a lot of Americans would simply believe what they saw and read on TV pretty much without question was something that greatly worked in his favor and helped him craft something very special. The budget was small, the actors somewhat inexperienced, and the shooting conditions were harsh. Texas was experiencing a heat wave around the time of filming, which only added to that stressful, desperate feel of the movie. After the opening crawl and its true crime style narration, we open on a group of young adults traveling in a van.
Should we pick him up?
Oh, yeah, man. Pick him up. He'll asphyxiate out there.
What does he look like?
Well, the son of a bitch is gonna smell just like the slaughterhouse.
Oh, give the guy a break. He can sit by Franklin.
What do you want to do?
Oh, he's
Pick him
weird
up, man.
looking.
Edwin Neal's performance as the hitchhiker is just simply very weird. In fact, it's possibly one of the weirdest performances I've ever seen. The character behaves in such a bizarre manner that it's almost funny sometimes even. The hitchhiker and our group share a dialogue, and the key part of this dialogue is a brief mention of a slaughterhouse where he, along with his family, used to work. The hitchhiker explains to the group that he and his younger brother were killers at the slaughterhouse, meaning they were the ones who killed the cattle. He says that they've been put out of a job because of advancements in technology at the time, referring specifically to the air gun used to kill the cattle rather than the old way, the sledgehammer. He much prefers the old way, he mentions. This isn't too far off from what a lot of people living in these parts of Texas were experiencing at the time, It's a believable aspect of the motivation of our villains. After they boot the hitchhiker out of the van, they stop for gas at the gas station. A seemingly kind old man, the cook, played by Jim Sydow, tells them that the gas tanks are empty and they'll have to wait around till tomorrow. He offers them some barbecue, but the group decide to carry on to check out an old home previously owned by a relative. The initial appearance of the iconic character Leatherface will forever be ingrained in my mind as one of the most shocking and disturbing scenes in film history. The abrupt and violent nature of the attack, the design of the character, the way the camera gets us uncomfortably close to Kirk as he seizes up while being repeatedly struck with a hammer. It's really uncomfortable stuff, and although it's not very graphic, it's just very disturbing in the way that it's shot and the sounds that play over it. I think the most notable thing about the scene is how there simply is no build-up. No musical score, no camera cues. The scene kind of just happens, and then it's over. We as the audience are left to just deal with the incident as it was presented to us, with no explanation of what's going on behind the massive sliding metal door.
I just can't take no pleasure in killing. There's just some things you gotta do. Don't mean you have to like it.
The most disturbing and uncomfortable scene of the entire movie is the infamous dinner scene. The way this scene is shot is great, intense, visceral close-ups paired with some really convincing performances. This scene is also where we get a bit of an idea of the dynamic between the cannibal family.
You act like a pack of hounds. We were just having fun. You think this is a party?
You can make him stop. No, he can't.
Shut your mouth.
But I think the most standout part of the entire scene is the inclusion of the grandpa character. He's this strange, mummified old man who's still alive and treated as the patriarch of the family. It's just weird and, again, uncomfortable stuff. The scene almost overstays its welcome because it's so maddening. The screaming and the laughing and the bickering with the close-ups is just one of those scenes that you really can't forget once you've seen it. As I stated previously in the video, there was a heat wave in Texas at the time. It's widely known that the actors had to step out of the room to throw up and come back to finish the scene. The heat in the small room from the lights and the rotting food and animal carcasses just created some horrible shooting conditions. The horror and agitation portrayed by the actors here is real. Whenever I watch the iconic ending shot of her escaping in the pan of the truck as Leatherface swings the chainsaw around in the middle of the road, I think to myself that it's a great ending that maintains the realism of the movie. She doesn't outmuscle the villain and win while delivering one-liners. She barely escapes with her life and appears to be completely insane, laughing hysterically. We cut to black, and the credits roll. In short, I think the strengths of the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre lie in its clever marketing and unparalleled raw filmmaking style. The mockumentary-type aesthetic with the true crime-style narration, the raw depiction of rural Texas, the heat and the sweat and the disturbing set design, the iconic characters and performances paired with an intense editing style. It's simply one of the most original and influential films of all time. Naturally, 3 sequels were released in 1986, 1990, and 1995. The films lost their step after the second movie from 1986, which was also directed by Hooper. TCM 3 and The Next Generation were big misfires. After the third sequel in 1995, the franchise had died down, only to be resurrected in 2003 by Michael Bay's production company, Platinum Dunes. The plan was to reboot the franchise with a remake of the 1974 original. Music video director Marcus Nispel was asked to direct. Nispel was hesitant to remake such a beloved film, but eventually agreed to make the movie. The remake was given an estimated budget of about $9 million. To date, worldwide, it's grossed over $100 million, making it the most financially successful Texas Chainsaw movie of all time. When remaking a classic, it's a bit of a balancing act. The filmmakers are expected to keep the spirit of the original film intact, while also attempting to update things and come up with creative ideas. I think the 2003 version does an excellent job of recreating or updating certain scenes and knowing when not to mess with other more iconic scenes. The film has a more muted color palette this time around. The bright, saturated colors and beaming Texas heat of the original are replaced with a more gray, bleak, depressing, waterlogged look. Visually, I've always really liked the style and feel of the film. It doesn't completely copy the style of the original, but still creates this gritty, sweaty look that works really well. The cast is led by the beautiful and talented Jessica Biel. She does an excellent job here. In fact, our group of young adults in this version I find to be a lot more likable, Jonathan Tucker being another standout here. He also gives a great performance. Instead of beginning with a Star Wars-esque opening crawl, we get the same narration as the original, but it's put over a police crime scene tape.
Test. Okay, this is August 20th, 1973. The time is 3:47 p.m. Location is the Hewitt residence on Route 17. It's where victim 1 was found.
The opening narration paired with the evidence photographs followed by the crime scene tape, it's an effective sequence. It's an admirable attempt to recreate that feeling felt by audiences watching the opening of the original. Of course, we live in a different time now, so a simple Google search will tell you it's all fiction, but still, a great idea to include this kind of intro segment to give modern audiences at least a taste of what it might have been like to watch the original during its time of release. The hitchhiker scene in the 2003 remake is quite different than the original scene. Our expectation as fans of the original film is that the group will be attacked by the hitchhiker. In this film, though, the writers made the decision to make the hitchhiker a survivor of the cannibal family's attack. She ends her own life in front of them after warning them they'll die passing through this area. There's an incredible shot here where the camera travels through the bullet hole in the woman's head, straight out through the back of the van. This is some great camera work that should be given more respect. This scene obviously does an incredible job of subverting expectations, shocking us, and giving our characters the first real conflict that sets the story into motion. Great writing and camera work create a memorable and shocking scene here. In the original film, audiences obviously weren't familiar with the character of Leatherface. This time around, we know the monster lurking behind the big sliding metal door. In this movie, the director was tasked with making Leatherface bigger and scarier than the original. To accomplish this, he started by casting 6'5" former bodybuilder Andrew Bryniarski. And with this casting, it's certain that Leatherface this time, more so than any other time, really is a physically imposing presence. We get shots of Leatherface's eye peeping through holes in the wall, silently stalking and waiting for the perfect time to strike. This movie does, at times, build up the arrival of the character. In the original, a lot of scenes played like a report of what happened, and not necessarily like a movie would traditionally present things. An example being the lack of build-up and tension in the attack scenes. This version, however, is definitely more of a commercial effort. We get scenes with genuine build-up and tension.
You're so dead you don't even know it. Come on, boy. Bring it. Bring it.
Sheriff Hoyt acts as a replacement or revamp of the Cook character from the original. Late great actor R. Lee Ermey was cast to play the character. Ermey was an 11-year veteran of the United States Marine Corps, known for his roles in Apocalypse Now and Full Metal Jacket. If one thing is for sure, Ermey always possessed an ability to deliver memorable scenes with his commanding presence. A scene that really stands out to me as a highlight in the actor's career is the scene in the van from this movie with Jonathan Tucker's character. This scene delivers some very convincing acting.
You don't have the fucking balls, do you?
Pull the fucking trigger!
Fuck you!
The tension here is undeniable, and it's all anchored by Ermey's ability to take control of a scene and get incredible performances out of his co-stars. This scene inevitably leads to the death of the Pepper character, which has always been one of the most disturbing moments in the movie. The specific shot that I'm talking about is the moment where Beale's character makes eye contact with Leatherface while he's wearing Kemper's face. While the characterizations and backstories here are not very complex, there was mention of the two characters' intent to get married, and it adds some emotional impact to the scene. Once Beale's character is eventually captured, I initially was expecting a retread of the famous dinner scene from the original. Instead, this time around, director Marcus Nispel decides to make pretty much the rest of the film a series of cat and mouse chase sequences. I think the movie is very competent here in its staging of the chase sequences and sustaining the cat and mouse game between Beale and the masked killer. We get some nice set pieces that make for some great scenes with tension and suspense, the segment in the slaughterhouse being my personal favorite. The ending is where I feel the realism of the film kind of slips away. Obviously, the movie up until this point is a much more Hollywood studio-style production, but it still did maintain a decent level of grit and realism. Having Beale's character outmuscle Leatherface, chop his arm off, rescue a baby, and run over Sheriff Hoyt, and then make her escape, requires us to suspend our disbelief quite a bit. Too many things come together here for her character at the end, and it just takes me out of the movie. Typically, I really enjoy these kinds of endings if I'm being honest, but in the context of a Texas Chainsaw movie, I don't think it works very well. Regardless though, I believe despite its ending, the movie is excellent. Upon its initial release, Texas Chainsaw Massacre from 2003 was panned by critics as a pale imitation of the original. While I obviously would agree the remake isn't nearly as groundbreaking as the original, it still stands on its own as a memorable and technically sound film. We get some great actors delivering great performances, enough changes to the story for things to feel fresh and engaging, yet the same skeleton of the original story and aesthetic remain. The Texas Chainsaw Massacre from 2003 for me is one of the best horror remakes of all time.